Hey, welcome to Two Old Geeks Talking. I'm Rob.
I'm Trace, and today we're talking about comic book collecting. Anytime you see us in front of the long boxes, that's a hint we're talking something comic related. And so we're going to talk about comic book collecting then and now. So between the two of us, we got like over 100 years
Right.
of comic
Yeah.
book collecting experience. And so let me ask you, do you think there'll ever be a time moving forward where there won't be comics?
I want to say there'll never be a time where there isn't an actual paper comic book, but I feel like I'd be lying to you,
Yeah.
to be honest, because there's so much digital stuff out there. There's so many young men and women who, unless they have parents like us that stress the importance of smelling, feeling, touching a comic book, whenever they obtain a new collection, it'll end up being sold off.
See, I think that, well, first of all, on that note, I think that the new generation is starting to get more appreciation of physical media. You see young people buying, albums now,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and because you actually have something tangible in your hand versus downloading something. But to me, I think comics will always be around in some form, and the reason being is, from cavemen drawn on, cave walls to the Egyptian hieroglyphics, we love to tell stories through pictures.
True.
And really, that comic books are just an extension of that. And my first comic, and actually there was a friend of our father's named Steve Sparrow.
Right.
And when I was little, when I mean little, I mean like 5, he gave us some of his comics. He split them up between me and Robert. And the first comic I ever had, I think we had 3 or 4 piece, something like that.
Right.
Was Daredevil number 11. Now this isn't that one.
Right.
Because I was 5. And so, I used to keep it in my pillowcase. And then at nighttime, I'd get underneath the covers with a flashlight and I'd read it. And it's funny because it was a Daredevil comic, but I remember about it was the villains, which, was like Birdman and Ape Man and
Right.
Frogman. And that really stuck in my mind as a 5-year-old. Do you remember getting those comics?
Yeah, because one of them that I got was one of the large comic books, and like you said, I no longer have it. But that's not because I destroyed it. I actually gifted it to somebody. It was Superman and Flash racing. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember it, yeah.
And they was the large. I'll show you. This is an example of what they were. They was the large comic books, the big prints that used to come out that they don't make anymore. Those kind of comic books. And these were actually ones that you got me.
Yeah. Actually, there was a little store in town called Ben Franklin, and I got those. And the first one came out before the Star Wars movie was released.
Right.
So I actually got to read the comic before the movie was released. But that kind of got me into comic book collecting. Also, I had a friend named Frank Trusty, he was a few years older than me, and he was probably the closest thing to a big brother I ever had. But he would drag me to these comic book stores, and I'd kind of gotten out of collecting. But in my early teen years, he would drive me to these comic book stores, and I kind of really got into collecting again. In fact, your Holy Grail comic that you had, your Wolverine,
Yeah.
I actually bought that at one of the
Well,
stores.
actually, it's Incredible Hulk 181. Yep.
And so he was a huge Wolverine fan. I
Right.
guess he still is. And I think I get $50 for that back in like 1981 or
So
something.
for
like that.
this episode of Two Old Geeks Talking, I was going through my comic books. I literally have the largest box I have has every Wolverine comic from issue number 1 all the way to about maybe 10 years ago. That is a whole lot of Wolverine comic books.
Yeah, you got a lot of comics, but yours are like here, there, and everywhere. You don't really have yours
Right.
all bagged and board, but you will at some point. You will, I promise. Yeah. But when we were growing up, there wasn't a thing called the internet. The World Wide
No,
Web didn't
right.
exist. So like when you wanted to get comics, you go to comic book store or you go to yard sales.
When we were young, there wasn't even comic book stores, like actual stores.
Not very many. No. And the comic book stores peaked out in the 1990s. There were over 10,000 comic book stores in the United States. Right now, There's around 2,000 comic book stores. So I mean, that's how much it's dropped from the 90s to now. But we would buy these things called newspapers. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
But and you would look through the ads in the back, and we had an ad one time, and it was a city not too far from where we live called Lexington. And the guy said he was having comics for sale. Well, that's rare. You know, most of the time it's yard sale, garage sale, but this guy had comics for sale. So I think I was 16, and me and Robert rode up there. And so it was in a kind of maybe a rough neighborhood.
Right.
We knocked on
it was
the door.
college. It was right off campus.
Yeah, so,
UK campus.
Yeah, it was an older house. It was dark, and we knock on the door. The door opens up, and there's this one-eyed Jamaican standing there.
And not like nearly 7 foot tall.
Yeah.
Gentleman.
So he had one dead eye.
White as a ghost. This eye was just like
dreadlocks.
White.
Looked like a villain from a Steven Seagal movie.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, do you have some comics for sale? He's like, yeah, follow me. And we're like, okay. Yeah. And so we walk into his house, and then we start going down his basement. Now, his basement.
Okay, wait a second. Just the stairs to the basement. The door was only this freaking wide. Yeah. I'm a big guy. I could not fit down that door now. As a teenager, I was squeezing down a flight of stairs. It was like, it's down there, man, down in the dark. Right. And I'm sitting there going, holy crap.
And the basement looked like something he had dug with a spoon.
Yeah,
it didn't really look
rough.
like it came with the house. Like, it may be something he had made himself.
Laid concrete.
But when you get down there, he flipped a switch, and these big, bright fluorescent lights come on. And he had all these card tables with long boxes after long boxes. I'm talking maybe 50 long boxes down there, if not more. And he was like, yeah, just go through them and take your time. Nicest guy in the world, even though he scared us to death. And you actually have one of the comics that you bought from him.
Right. Well, actually, I have a few of them. One of them is Nick Fury and his Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. #2. That was one of them I got, and that's one of my personal favorites. I don't know if you would consider it a Holy Grail comic book, but another one that I do consider a Holy Grail, and I got several. Back then they were called Action Jungle comics, but it was actually the first appearances and the first issues of Black Panther, and I have a ton of those, and I am so happy to have those. And if it wasn't for that Jamaican gentleman, I wouldn't have those as well.
Yeah, so I mean we ended up not being killed and getting some good comics.
Right.
So
it turned out to be a good time, good day, awesome day.
The other day, first of all, I love like Silver Age Marvel.
Right.
So lots of times before I go to bed, I like to read, and so sometimes I'll read a book, and sometimes I'll read a comic book. So like the other day, I was laying in bed, and I had old Silver Age Marvel that I'd unbagged.
Right.
And I was sitting there and I was reading it, and I kind of stopped and I just started kind of sniffing the comic book, because old comic book just has a certain smell to it.
Oh, I do that with toys and comic books and everything else. Just open them up and just
so
look, just go ahead, take a whiff of that.
Yeah, so my wife comes in to the bedroom and she sees me in there with my eyes closed going, and she's like, are you sniffing that comic? And I'm like, yeah.
It takes you back.
Yeah, don't judge me.
It takes you back to your childhood.
Right. But anyway, sights and sounds and stuff like that. But the modern comics, nothing wrong with them. I mean, they're really on quality paper and glossy print and whatnot. But that old newspaper print, it just had a feel to it and a smell to it. And but one of the greatest things as a comic book collector, if you have a comic book store near you, is Wednesdays, because Wednesday is
comic book day.
Yeah, so you show up on Wednesday, and all the other geeks in the area show up, and you
vultures.
Circling
around a carcass.
So everybody's trying to get that issue they want, and so you kind of gather around the cash register and you have a 15-20 minute conversation, and that's kind of what we base Two Old Geeks Talking on, is just talking about geeky stuff. But it was nice to do that every week with different people, and you build friendships that way, and it's kind of nice. So I have about 10 long boxes, and these here are my wife's, and I have to limit myself to 10 long boxes. So what happens is when they get full, I thin them out. So
see, you're good.
Yeah, I used to sell them on eBay, I'd give some to you for like birthdays and Christmas and whatnot. I've given some to friends, and I've sold some online, and so. But I try to just keep 10 long boxes. But as far as storing comics, I mean, for me, how I store comics, just bag and board them and use the old long boxes. I know everybody's got a different system, and everybody looks at it a little different. But I mean, this is the way people stored comics probably ever since the 60s.
Right.
And the reason the older comics are worth more is because back in the day, people read a comic and they'd throw it over in the corner. Or they read a comic, and at one time, back during the wartime, you could turn your comic in and get so much money back, like a recycled glass, because it was made of paper.
Right.
And so that's why your Action Comics #1, which is first appearance of Superman, recently sold for $3.5 million last few weeks ago.
Right. That's awesome.
And it's because there's high demand and low supply. So as long as you got high demand and low supply, there's money to be made there.
Right.
So I personally I'm not real big into a lot of modern comics, and so I typically buy older comics, and they're not making any more of them, and they're a decent investment. But I really don't buy them for the investment. You know, the comic industry kind of peaked out back in the 90s. We talked about that earlier. And they come up with all kinds of gimmicks. They had polybagged comics. Do you have an example of that?
Yes. The Executioner Song. And this is a polybag. It's a comic book that came in a bag. Of course, I have now to have it in a bag.
That's a bunch of bags.
Yeah, that's a bunch of bags. So we have this. It's an Executioner Song, and a lot of them came in a collector's bag.
Yeah, sometimes they come with a card.
Right.
A trading card.
Some of them came with holograms.
Do you remember Superman, The Death of Superman? It was polybagged.
I have every
black
one of them.
cover.
Yeah, The Death of Superman. I have one, Superman Returns, the Steel, all the ones that went along with it. Yep.
And people were buying those thinking, well, you know, I'm going to put my kids through college by The Death of Superman.
No.
But anybody that's into comics knows that it's very rare that somebody dies in a comic that they don't come back. I knew it was a gimmick.
Right.
You knew it was a gimmick.
Well, and that's the thing about comic book collecting. Gimmicks and major events in comic books was not a thing when we first started comic book collecting. It wasn't until later down the road that you had major events and stuff like that happened.
You know, I mean, one thing comic book companies do now is they do a crossover about twice a year.
Right.
A crossover, one of the first crossovers
was
that's where you get several superheroes from several individual issues.
Well, you also back in the day they also had Marvel versus DC.
Right.
But one of the very first epic things that ever happened, and I have this collection here all shoved in one bag, is the Secret Wars.
Yeah, it was huge.
It was huge back then.
And I mean, everybody jumped behind it because it didn't happen every day. But now they have crossovers 2 or 3 a year, and they do it to try to sell comics. But when you got a writer that's writing a storyline, and then the publisher like Marvel bust in, they're like, "Hey, we're getting ready to do a crossover, and you need to incorporate this into your story."
Yeah.
It throws the story off, and to be honest with you, more than maybe twice a year, a crossover kind of disrupts an ongoing title. I'm not a big fan of so many crossovers. Are you? I mean, they recently had one like King in Black or King of Black. It was a Venom guide come down, and it was in all the Marvel titles. And anyway, I read Daredevil. I read modern Daredevil.
Okay.
So Chip Zdarsky is writing that. So they basically come in on a street level character like Daredevil, and they're like, "Hey, you need to incorporate this Venom guide into your story." Well, you know, he got a story written, and all of a sudden he's got to put the brakes on it,
right?
Tell this story, and
take
then
a left turn, and then work back around.
Yeah, and then work back around, and that's ridiculous, and it throws everything off.
Right.
And another thing they do is they restart comics over at #1. Tell me about that, brother.
Okay. That's my pet peeve, because that's kind of what got me out of collecting. Was you know, okay, so he's Marvel fan, I'm DC fan, and when DC did the New 52, and they rebooted everything from the get-go and even changed people's origins. That's what pretty much broke me of collecting. And I know that seems like it's been so long ago. For me, it doesn't seem that long ago.
Right.
But yeah, I can understand trying to get to a younger audience, but when you kind of bend over your whole audience and kind of ram them in the butt and say screw you, well, it just irritated.
Yeah,
the hell
they
out
start
of
over. Number one, sell more than any other comic. So sometimes some executive said, you know what, we should have a number one every year. Just restart Daredevil over every year. I had a longtime friend named Jody Smith, and I ran into him in a comic book store. And
hey, Jody.
And he said he was done. He said, I'm done. He said, I'm tired of reading the same origin story every year. And so
let me guess, was it Batman?
No, it was I think he was into Marvel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they tried to do different covers. So like, there's all kinds of variant covers now. So you order an issue of comic, and you can get a regular issue, or you can get a variant cover. An example of a variant cover would be, this is a cosplay cover. I'm in a cosplay, but it's for Red Sonja.
Okay.
And that's kind of nice if you're ordering online or you're at the comic book store and you've got choice. So you're getting the comic you want.
Right.
Because you got 3 or 4 different covers to choose from. So I don't have a problem with that. A new thing they come out with is the virgin cover. This means a cover that nobody's had sex with. Now the virgin cover, as you can tell,
do I get to smell that one?
Yeah, it doesn't say Daredevil, and it doesn't have any kind of writing or who the writer or the artist is. So it's just the artwork, and they call that the virgin cover.
Okay.
And so that's another popular thing. So they're always trying to find out with gimmicks, trying to get comics, trying to make money off comics, because their goal really is to make money.
Right.
You know, and a new thing that's come up since you and I started collecting is the slabbed comic. That's what they call it, the slabbed comic.
That scares me, to be honest.
Yeah, it's
kind of leaning forward.
There's different companies that do it. The main company is CGC, and what they'll do, when we were kids, this is how you rated a comic. It was like on a scale from 1 to 8. So it would be.
Can I?
Yeah, absolutely. It was like near mint. See if I can get these. Near mint. No, I'm sorry. Mint. Near mint. Very good. Good.
Fair and poor, or something like
very
that.
Fair. Or very good, fair, and poor. There was 8 of them all together. And now they rate them on a scale from 1 to 10. And so I bought this Slab comic, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I don't like Slab Comics.
So you didn't send this off. This is when you bought this one.
This is when I bought. Okay. And the reason I bought it is because I wanted this issue, 168, which is the first appearance of Elektra, because I'm a big Daredevil fan. But the reason I bought it is because I could get this one cheaper than I could some raw editions. And raw editions is what they call unslabbed comic.
Okay. So
why pay more for a raw edition when I can get something cheaper, the slab? Now, this isn't going to stay in here because, to me, comics are meant to be read. They're meant to be held. They're meant to be enjoyed. And so this will get taken apart. I just kept it together just for this video. And there's nothing wrong with Slab Comics, but
my question is like, if I send off this comic book here, and I want somebody to grade it,
right?
How do I know I'm getting this comic back?
Well, I mean, they're fair. Here's what you run into. When you grew up and you were getting ready to sell a comic, so let's say I'm selling a comic to you. You're the comic book store, or you're the guy that's going to buy the comic, and I'm selling the comic. So you would say, I'm saying, hey, this is near mint. And you look at it and say, no, that's just very good.
Yeah.
And so we've got an argument going on here. I was like, no, it's near mint. He's like, no, it's very good. So I either have to relent and take your price,
right,
or just take my comic and say, like, that old man's crazy. This is near mint. So all of a sudden, CGC steps in between us. They're like, hold it. Time out, guys. Let me grade the comic. Of course, I'm going to charge you $50 to grade a comic,
right,
plus a percentage of what the comic's worth. And plus, I'm going to take almost a year to grade that comic. So they step in and they're like, hold up, guys. Hold up. I'll grade it, and I'll step in behind you. This comic is a 6 on a scale from 1 to 10. So that was a genius idea, and it was a good business model, and it's super popular. Blackstone, which is a Wall Street company, recently bought CGC, and what they do is they buy a company and they improve it, and then they sell it. And so I'm sure they'll be selling it soon, but the problem with CGC is people's turning their comics in. They're taking a year to get it back.
Right.
And there's actually been people that took their comics, sent to CGC, got it back, unslabbed it, sent it back again, and got a different rating on it. So it's all subjective, you know, whether he's arguing that it's very good and I'm arguing that it's near mint. Even the guy that steps in between us, it's just his opinion. It's just his opinion. And you don't have one guy making the decision. I'm sure they have dozens of guys, if not more, working with CGC.
Opinions are like a-holes.
Yeah,
all stink.
yeah, and everybody has one.
Yep.
So G.R.R. Martin, which you always say J.R.R. Martin, but it's G.R.R. Martin.
Okay, sorry.
It's all right. He forgives you. He likes to free the comics. So he's a big old Silver Age Marvel fan like me. So he'll buy these slab comics and he'll just unslab them, and that's what I'm going to do with this one. You know, to me, I got a buddy of mine that named Jim who collects guns, and recently he talked about how he had a lot of antique guns. It was worth a lot of money. Some of them that were sentimental to him, but he kept them in a gun safe because they were worth so much money.
Right.
And how he couldn't really enjoy them because he used to have them in a nice cherry gun case where he could go by and he could enjoy them, but you know, because of thieves, he worries about them being stolen.
Right.
So he's got them in a nice gun case, and how he doesn't get to enjoy them anymore. He knows he has them and they're there, but he has to go through.
Pull them out.
He has to go through a process.
Yeah.
To me, that's what you're doing with the slab comic. I mean, you're taking something and you're taking something that you could read and you could enjoy. It's really an art form, and you're just sealing it up in a chunk of plastic. Now, nothing against CGC and nothing against you if you like slab comics, but personally, it's not my cup of tea. I don't think it's your cup of tea either, is it?
No. Well, none of mine's in pieces.
So let's talk about Comic Cons for a little bit. One of the first of all, Comic Cons are getting fairly common, but when we were kids, they weren't.
No.
There was a Comic Con we drove to when I was probably about 16 or 17. Snowstorm hit. I think it was in Lexington or Louisville. And I mean, they were telling people you're taking your life in your own hands.
For you who don't know, Lexington, Louisville's like several counties away from where we live.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like an hour drive.
Yeah.
So they're like, if you get on the road, you're risking your life. You shouldn't get on the road. But we had to go to the Comic Con because it was that weekend.
Yeah.
So we go to the Comic Con. So we're driving there, and we get there, and it's closed down because of weather. Because anybody should have known that. But like I said, this is before the internet, so we drive all the way back. Tell you how bad the weather was. I had a Dodge Daytona, and it was a front wheel drive, and I had the Mercy brake on, and I never took it off all the way back from Lexington.
It wasn't until he dropped me off and he got ready to leave, and I noticed his back wheels wasn't turning; his tail was just sliding.
Right. So I mean, the front wheels were pulling the back wheels
the whole way.
The whole way, and to tell you how slick it was outside, it did no damage whatsoever.
Not to the
tires.
Brakes, not to the tires, not to anything.
Nothing. And people kept tooting at us and flashing their lights, and we were like, "What's up with that?" But yeah, we got several good sized comic books. We got the Lexington Comic Con in the area. We've got the one up in Atlanta, Dragon Con. So we got some. As a matter of fact, we're going to Comic Con today, right here in our hometown, Frankfort, in Kentucky. So Comic Cons have come a long way. Now, typical Comic Cons are 2 to 3 days. The best way to get a deal on a comic at a Comic Con is to wait that last day, because that dealer he's brought all that inventory with him, and he's going to have to take all that inventory back, and he's not there for free. He paid money for that space, and oftentimes quite a bit of money.
Right.
So you can come in there on the last day and get some real good deals as far as comic, and they're all willing to work with you for the most part, especially on that last day. The only bad thing is if there's like one comic you really want, and you see it on day one of a day 3, or 3-day Comic-Con, you're taking a risk.
You're like rolling the dice.
Yeah, because you come back on that last day and it might be sold. But a lot of people invest in comics now, and they'll buy and sell, and I don't know if you can make a living doing that. For us, you and I, we just read comics because we enjoy it.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with investing in comics, but for a while you kind of got bit by the bug.
I did. So there as a young man, and I got bit by the bug fast, because in my mind I decided I was going to get every Avenger ever made, every Avenger comic. Yeah. And we remember the woman who had the comic books in her living room across the railroad tracks.
Railroad tracks, yeah.
I deplenished every Avenger she had, but no way I never would have ever got even all of them. So I moved on to Wolverine. But then I started buying just because I thought it would be worth something.
Yeah.
Every #1 comic book. And this is just like 1/16 of the comic books that I bought. I bought so many #1 comic books. And especially when Image became a new first started. Yeah. I mean, I was around before Image. And I was buying all their #1s, which very few of them are worth anything.
Yeah, it's all supply and demand. So
right.
How much was the print run versus how many people want it?
Right.
It's hard for a modern comic to reach a lot of money nowadays. There's hype because of social media about every comic. Oh, this is the greatest thing, new character. This is going to be a key issue in the future. But if you got print runs that big, and people collect comics now, back in the day they didn't collect them. Back in the day, they put them in their pillowcase when they were kids.
Oh, yeah. I literally have done that.
Yeah, so, I mean, the thing is that it's hard to get a modern comic. They peak out and they go down quick. Invested comics, if that's what you want to do, I'm happy for you. But I don't think you'll ever be a rich man by doing that. Mm. So, a new thing that's come up in the last few years is Kickstarter and Indiegogo.
Okay.
And what that is like, so
that's new to me.
So that you don't have to deal with the new publishers. You can go through Kickstarter, and let's say you and I wanted to make a comic. So we make a comic, we get it published, and then we'd sell it through Kickstarter. Maybe if you donated this much money, you would get an issue. If you donated a little bit more, you get a signed issue. Donate a little bit more, you might get a variant cover. Actually,
this is like new.
This is fairly new. It's been the last few years. So you got Kickstarter and Indiegogo. So Kickstarter they're very controlling over what they release. I mean, they're kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? If they don't like the way you think, if they don't like your comic, they won't let you put it on Kickstarter.
Right. And
they're kind of the thought police. Whereas Indiegogo, they don't care. I mean, you put your comic out, you do whatever you want in your comic, they don't care. So I actually ordered some comics on Indiegogo. I was hoping they'd be in by this video. It was a comic called War Party. Mm-hmm. It was about some colonials that had a kid kidnapped from their fort, and they learned from the local Indian tribe how to become skinwalkers, and so they turn into different type of werewolf and werebear and what have you. Okay. They go, but anyway, I'm into that.
Right.
So anyway, I ordered it, and it was nice. I ordered a comic. They're on their way. It's supposed to arrive about 2-3 days. And the artist contacted me via email. Said, hey, man, I appreciate your purchase. And, this is stuff I might be working on in the future. And I think Josh was his name. But it was kind of nice. It's kind of nice. Kickstarter had Keanu Reeves come out with Berserker. It come out on Kickstarter. It's so popular that Netflix has bought the rights to it. They're going to make a series of it. Mm-hmm. And Boom Studios.
Now, is that just because he's Keanu Reeves?
Doesn't hurt.
Right.
But Kickstarter, Boom Studios, which is a smaller publisher who I like, they put a lot of stuff on Kickstarter. Matter of fact, they put Power Rangers on there recently, like all their Power Ranger comics, a big trade paperback. So these smaller companies are making big money going through Kickstarter, and you get your money up front before you actually publish the comics sometimes. Okay. So it's kind of nice. But
now, back in the day, what I remember comic book artists, unless they had a contract with Marvel and DC, they literally would bring their comic books to the comic book
yeah,
store
that's the way you did it.
and sell them there.
Yeah.
The guy that did Grateful Dead, that's the way he got some of his start.
Walking
out.
Dead.
Or Walking
You
Dead.
always say Grateful Dead.
Well, I'm not into the comic book.
Too much of that.
Yeah, but not too much of this, baby. So that's how he got his start, and that's where a lot of comic book artists or comic book companies got their start, was just their local comic book store.
Well, American comics have got their butt kicked in the last few months by manga, okay?
Okay.
So your big two, DC and Marvel, they've gotten really woke. You know, their idea of a good storyline is let's change the sex of a character or let's change the race of a character. And wow, we did really good there, didn't we? And they've confused activism with heroism, and they've turned off a lot of readers. So a lot of readers are going to Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and some of the smaller publishers. Comics will always be around, but DC and Marvel's kind of really taken a hit in the last few months. The top 10 comics over the last few months have all been Japanese comics. So Japan is kicking America's butt when it comes to sale. I mean, we're lucky if we sell like 30, 40, 50,000 copies of an issue, and they're selling like 1.5 million.
Now, are we talking about tangible copies or digital?
No, tangible copies. Yeah, okay. Tangible copies. So manga, Japan's like, you know, we don't care about your politics. We just want to tell a good story. That's all we care about. And so they've made huge strides into the American market in the last few years, especially in the last year, because of their way of storytelling. And I guess lastly, first of all, we want to talk about, do you have anything to add before I close out? You said something about price guides.
Yeah, when I was younger, you went to the comic book store and you asked to see, most of the time it was the Overstreet price guide. And only the comic book stores had those price guides. You couldn't purchase them for yourself. So then shortly, probably into the 80s and 90s, up to about 2000, people got Wizard magazines. And Wizard magazine was a geek-related magazine that was basically had in the back of it price guides. You could literally look up month by month what your comic books was worth. Somebody asked me, did you look in that price guide, your Wizard price guide, to see what your comic book? I was like, well, this price guide was made back in 99, so no, that's I don't want to use that price guide
they
anymore.
don't make that anymore.
Yeah, so now they've got online price guides.
Yeah.
But back in the day, we literally had to purchase price guides, which I think is crazy.
Yeah.
They're gone now.
Yeah, well, I hope magazine print is kind of on the down go. But as far as giveaways, okay, the winner, our last video was Daredevil video, and the Chip Zdarsky set of Daredevil covers and Daredevil comics. Luke Gioy, he won that, so congratulations, Luke. I'm happy for you. Contact us, and we'll get that to you.
Right.
And then as far as the hardback by Mark Waid, Daredevil, that was won by Sir Dreadford. And he's actually a knight. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, you can tell by the sir. So contact us, and we will get that to you. And for today's giveaway, we try to keep it related to the topic at hand if we can. So what I'm going to do is get together some comics, and if you're a comic collector or you're not a comic collector, we'll send you a few comics, and I'll make sure I throw an old Silver Age Marvel in there because I'm just that kind of guy. And you can sniff it if you want to. And some bags and boards, and you can have your addition to your comic book collection, or beginning of a comic book collection. And comics are fun. And they teach kids to read, and they entertain old men. So there you go. All right, are you done, brother?
I think I'm done.
All right, man. We're done.
Bye.